2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 643rd weekly session of Bob Mankoff and Facebook Live. Actually, I think it's only the third, but eventually we'll get there. I'm really excited about today's Facebook Live with Pablo Suarez, a friend of mine for a number of years, and someone who is just doing fascinating things with humor. Of course, I'm a big fan of humor, especially cartoons, but I've studied cartoons, doing them. Here I am studying them, the psychology of humor, poring over all the experiments and the uses of humor. But Pablo Suarez, a researcher, a mathematician, a humanitarian who's done amazing work for a lot of nonprofits, is making real wonderful uses of humor to stimulate dialogue in organizations, to enhance creativity, and basically using humor in the form of cartoons for humanity, which makes a lot of sense. He's a humanitarian. So please welcome Pablo Suarez, who also Pablo is always pushing the frontiers of pretty much everything, but especially technology. So rather than do a boring PowerPoint, he's got a whole new piece of software in which he appears in front of the images, and it's really quite remarkable. The downside is it's really entertaining, but if he moves around too much, it'll make you nauseous. But there's a downside to everything, but the upside is always Pablo. Take it away, Pablo.
So much, Bob. What a privilege, what a joy to be part of this conversation. Hello, friends. I'm Pablo Suarez. My strange accent comes from Argentina, where, like in the rest of the world, movement can happen and can make you nauseous in multiple ways. I am a math geek. I enjoy using the language of mathematics to understand complexity, especially to understand and anticipate change and what we can do about it. And I had the fortune of first becoming an engineer, then a researcher on climate and disasters. And then about 16, 17 years ago, I became a humanitarian worker. So I'm going to now start pushing buttons where everything can fail. That's a photo of me in Mozambique. Let me make that bigger. Let me make myself smaller, maybe a little bit semi-transparent. There we go. So I am now wearing a pinkish shirt. I was then wearing a pinkish shirt. That's me over there under a tree in Xai-Xai, Mozambique, at a workshop about flood preparedness. This is in the floodplain of the Limpopo River Basin, where hundreds of people had died, and those trees had actually saved lives, as those lucky enough to get there climbed on them. But the reason why people died was that there was an unprecedented amount of rain falling upstream, and water was coming down the river, and this community, like many others, got an early warning saying, watch out, the floods are coming. And they were like, it's okay, we have time, because there's usually a slow progression. But this one was so fast that it caught too many people by surprise. Chief Fabiao Tonga, who is speaking in that photo, you see him standing, you see him that he's mostly addressing the other men who are sitting on the benches a little further, while the women are sitting on the floor. And it's usually the women who have to take care of the children on a normal day as well as on a flood day. This was my baptism of fire. I learned that science and talking science not only can put people to sleep, but also it has to be absorbed by potential users of knowledge who have a very complex set of realities to deal with, from language barriers to cultural issues that make some people more powerful than others. And this is true not just in rural Mozambique, but also in urban United States and out on the International Space Station. Group dynamics shape what we notice. And from science, there's a lot being said trying to make people notice. This is a report from a few years ago from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It was a report full of science about the ocean and the cryosphere. When I first reached out to Bob trying to get him and his team to help us to communicate this science, one of the first remarks was, of course, a low-hanging fruit of a joke. The cryosphere? Who says that? Is it a sphere full of crying people? And of course, that's kind of what the planet can become if we don't address the causes of climate change. Cryosphere refers to ice. How much the ice is actually melting is terrifying. The report is full of those graphs that show rising temperature, dwindling ice, volatility of certain things like ocean acidification and so on. And when we worked with cartoon collections and the artists from Cartoon Stock, we looked for advice on how to communicate this more effectively. And here's a cartoon that was published by our team, the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center, a global team of humanitarians that includes about 5 of us, including myself, who have been contributing scientific authors to these reports. How do you communicate this effectively? With this cartoon. For those of you who cannot see the details because of bandwidth, etc., a couple on the beach, the sun is setting, but there's something strange. The sun is not setting behind the horizon, it is setting inside the water of the ocean. And the caption says, "That can't be good." This is, in my opinion, the best depiction of the science of how climate change is affecting the oceans. The oceans are warming steadily, slowly, but very clearly and noticeably in a way that we see happening. We know why. It's not that the sun is inside the water, but the effect is similar. There's energy transfer, the waters are getting warmer, and that can't be good. Those of us who are familiar with the science, whenever we look at what we see, whether it's a graph or an equation or a map of temperature anomalies, we see the desire to scream because it's getting nasty, it's getting bad. This has a lot of red, but I, for the first time in my life, are experiencing a lot of darkness because the planet is not going in a direction that is amenable for humans to have a good, easy, predictable life. So when I first met with Bob, I don't know how long ago, 4 years ago or so, and we talked about what we were doing, and he shared humor, I shared my work on risk. He said, "I have a cartoon for you." And it was a cartoon about a couple sitting on a couch, the couch on a waterfall, the waterfall approaching a cliff. And this depicts exactly where we are now as humans. Change tends to be gradual until it becomes abrupt. Now, being the math geek I am, I started adding some mathematical variables to this. D for distance to the edge where things change abruptly. H for the height from which we fall, the probability of damage, and so on. When we were first going to present jointly at a conference at Harvard University on geoengineering, I shared with Bob what I intended to say, and he gave me full of red notes. And where it says D, he crossed out distance and he said, "That stands for denial. Do we dare recognize how close we are to the danger?" That's what humor helps us do. H, he said, it's not height, it's hell. Down there, it's horrible. Of course, his original caption was, "We've got to talk." And that's what we have to do. And in a way, we are talking. But let me tell you, I've been to a lot of conferences, workshops, seminars, and so on changing risks about climate and other things. Not just long-term climate, but tomorrow's hurricane, El Nino, droughts, extreme temperatures. This is what it looks like when we agree that we've got to talk and we talk. Look at those people. Would you like to be there? Would you like to spend a day or 2 weeks of your life in this kind of conference, designed intentionally to be devoid of humor because humor is perceived to be superficial or inappropriate? These events remind me of a cartoon by Drew Dernovich. We're stuck, and what do we do about being stuck? We try honking again. As a system dynamics modeler who uses mathematics to understand and address change, this cartoon is awesome because it depicts that the failure is not in the car or in the honk, it's in the system that has created the conditions for us being stuck. Our systems for talking are badly designed. If you want to resolve this traffic jam, you have to look ahead. You have to see whether there was an accident that has to be cleaned, or there's too few lanes and it needs to be expanded, or if it's time to give up on cars and invest in public transportation or teleconferencing approaches for work. So we started working with entities to enrich conversations through the use of cartoons. Here's one example. There was a conference held in the Middle East, bringing together economists, experts on disaster financing, authorities from countries in South Asia. And you can see that we had that cartoon on the wall. Participants were invited to annotate the cartoon based on the conversation they have just had about insurance and the like. And people expressed with candor what came to mind. For example, let's create another project or program like the one we created years ago and which also failed. What are the chances of this level of candor in the presence of Madam Deputy Minister? I love how working with Bob Mankoff and cartoonists and cartoons and humor, we have been able to enable people to express not only the factual truths, but also the emotional truths. We have been working with others, including Daniel Stephens and the team at Good Games, to create a digital platform that enables people to continue this practice of engaging with cartoons and annotating cartoons and seeing what other people wrote and conversing about what's emerging through digital events. Now, I want to tell you one specific story about one of these events. A group of people says, yeah, we have to do things together, and so let's make sure that there is funding for the government to be present out in the field where disasters happen. And everyone clapped, and everyone was in agreement in the meeting with ministers, with authorities, with funders. But we had organized to also have cartoonists published in the New Yorker magazine joining in, maybe from their pajamas in their kitchen in New York City. And one of them, Kendra Allenby, upon listening to this idea that was so well received about bringing government to the field, she created this draft cartoon. A bureaucrat sitting on a desk with a laptop in the middle of a field. And someone nearby says to the other, we put him in the field, but it didn't help. We showed this and to the actual authorities who were making decisions. First, they were confused. Then they laughed because they recognized the reality of this. This is exactly what they're about to do. And then they said, wait, but that is us. So we invited participants to give advice on how to improve that draft cartoon. For example, in the country that they were talking about, the mountains are different. They're steeper, they're more aggressive. They said the field could be full of crops that are failing because of a drought. They gave advice on clothing and the like. And this is the final version. This cartoon was until recently, as far as I know, on the door of the office of Madam Deputy Minister. Humor is helping have candid conversations about what we're doing. And what we're doing is not enough. We have to do more, we have to talk more, we have to collaborate more, because climate is one of the many things that is happening. From these events that we call Cartoonathons, it's like a hackathon, where instead of having a marathonic encounter between experts and computer geeks, You have a Cartoonathon, a marathonic encounter of people with a problem and cartoon artists. We work together, we spend time understanding the issues, proposing solutions, and coming up with cartoons that help us understand what's going on and what to do about it, and enable richer dialogue. Here's the last cartoon I will share with you. Yes, we have a global pandemic, we have a changing climate that is getting worse, we have conflict going up and down, often up, whether it's across national borders in the Middle East, or if it is in the cities of your country with racist police violence. Economy that comes and goes. You know what? The disasters are not intentionally collaborating, but they are creating synergies that we need to address. And we, experts, government authorities, funders, private sector, humanitarian workers, and professional humorists, there are things we can do to do more, to collaborate better. So I'm going to become visible again, put this on the shoulder. Thank you for the chance to share some of these thoughts with you, and I look forward to the conversation that awaits.
All right. Now the conversation begins, and you out there in the audience, I guess it's an audience, please feel free to send Pablo any questions or me any questions about this topic, which is a serious topic. And the question with serious topics is, well, is humor appropriate to serious topics? And you do find in most organizations feel humor is not appropriate. So Pablo, how do we, because the situation is, the joke I often make is that, humor can be used as a force for good or evil, and that I've chosen evil, and you balance that out by choosing good. But I am a big believer in humor for that its uses are beyond entertainment. It's important uses, but how do we avoid that situation where we know people are very sensitive to humor because if a joke doesn't go over or if it offends someone, it's just it's one of the reasons why humor it's one of the reasons preventing humor from being used more widely. So how do you assure the organizations, and how do you deal with that issue?
So the most important thing is to recognize that there are valid reasons why people, especially senior people who can get fired or worse, are very reluctant. Humor can cause harm, especially when humor is used with the intention to provoke laughter. When I ask people, what do you think of when thinking of humor? They usually say, yeah, laughter, fun, jokes, stand-up. A joke, after studying much of what you recommended and what many others recommended, like Drew Tarvin and Belina Raffi and so on, jokes are statements intended to provoke laughter. Now, if you're trying to provoke laughter, there's a risk that you will provoke a little bit too much and offend, or that you will provoke not enough, be bland, and come across as an idiot. So I stay away from humor as a joke. Instead, I try to work with others to harness the power of cartoons, which are designed to do what I have noticed from you and other cartoonists. Humor, yes, it is fun, it is jokes, it is laughter, but it is also the detection of absurdity. It is also the realization of danger. It is also flourishing when there's ambiguity, when there's contradiction, when there's ridiculousness, when there's a mismatch.
But also when there's truth.
Exactly.
I think we're dealing is when you can have a joke for a joke's sake completely, and there's nothing wrong with that, of course. I mean, many jokes are completely innocuous, and they're a little wind-up toy that makes us laugh through surprise, incongruity, resolution. But humor, when humor, not everything that's true is funny and funny true, but there's an overlap where that exists. So, for example, along lines of what you mentioned, the joke is, we can't just make the same old mistakes. We've got to make new mistakes. Also, it is the same thing that it's the desire just to do new things doesn't free you from error. But I think the emotion of laughter, or at least mirth, or feeling good is important along with it, as long as it doesn't completely dominate, because humor shared between people is a sign of safety, that we're both sharing things and okay. And that's why I think it enables us to stimulate dialogue, because we feel safe when we bond over a joke together and we're both laughing together. And we also feel that there's a truth involved in it. So I think as long as you're dealing with that, and of course the fact is that everybody who participates in Cartoonathons knows what the parameters are, and they know what the function is, for it. How long back well, clearly you've always had a sense of humor. You've always enjoyed humor, but when growing up in Argentina, right? What kinds of humor were you exposed to? I guess they're well-known Argentinian cartoonists.
Yeah, I'd say that the most noticeable humor was the humor that emerged through play with my peers, whether it was playing as a 3-year-old with pots and pans or playing board games, which became an important part of my life. We would often change the rules of games to see what happens. And as you say, there's a surprise, there's a resolution, and that creates laughter. Tension, when there's no bad intention, can lead to laughter. And of course, I started treasuring and devouring our cartoon artists, especially Kino, Daniel Paz, Caloi, and so on. And now I can speak with the ones who haven't died. It's fantastic. One of the things I want to say, and I don't say this lightly, I have been fortunate to encounter different kinds of noticeable intelligence, of intelligence incarnate in human beings. Mostly in the beginning through street smart people in my neighborhood. Then, my grandma and my mom are in their own ways intelligent people. Then through mathematicians and scientists and engineers and so on. And then with all sorts of creative people. I can say unambiguously that the kind of intelligence that I find in my collaboration with professional humorists, especially cartoonists, who have to distill so much in one little thing, JPEG file, that intelligence is remarkable. And as we heard, Bob, in the last conversation we had with those folks from the artificial intelligence tribe, chances are that it will be the last bastion of humanity with the Turing test. Machines can replace us at almost anything. They will have a hard time creating humor like a humorist can.
And when they do, we'll just pull the plug.
If they let you.
That'll be the red light. But, you talk about creativity. And at one point I wrote is that, if a scientist gets one good idea a year, he wins the Nobel Prize. If a cartoonist gets one good idea a year, he's out of work. Or she's out of work. But there's another interesting thing about humor. It's a form of creativity, but when we use it as you've used it, it also stimulates creativity in looking at solutions. And this isn't just me talking. There's actually a lot of research on this that shows when people are exposed to humor, it could be cartoons or other kinds of use, and then they're given cognitive problems to solve, especially problems like, there's a weird problem on a creativity. You got a candle and you got some thumbtacks and a little box, and you got to put the candle, somehow attached to the wall. And usually people don't solve it because they don't that's what I call functional fixity. They have very narrow ideas about how things work. I think there's another one in which there's a hammer and a string, and somehow you have to put the hammer on the string as a pendulum to hit something to work it. But when people are exposed to humor first, this is actual evidence-based, they solve the problems because their minds are freed up. One thing is that human does a lot of things. I think cognitively it makes us think of things it wouldn't do, but emotionally it relaxes us. And when we're confronted with a problem, stress is not something that's conducive to it. So I think that's one of the things we're trying to bring out here in this conversation about Cartoonathons, about the use. I mean, my and Jessica's business, Cartoon Collections, Cartoon Stocks, is all about the use of humor. And you've made really good use of that, and I think other people are doing that as well.
One of the first things that you said when we met face to face that really smacked me in terms of how much opportunity to harness the power of humor for humanitarian work, for risk management, for dialogue, for learning. I was telling you, who knows what I was telling you, and you said, well, humor requires being awake. And what I find is that almost everything else that happens, a conference about climate change, it doesn't require being awake. You can be sound asleep, but look awake, and no one will get you out. Now, if you are exposed to a cartoon, you want to be awake because there's a puzzle there that is tempting to solve. And when you solve it, you're rewarded with a shot of juices in your brain that make you happier, that wake you up in a durable way that then makes you more capable of not only understanding the problem, climate or whatever, and wanting to find solutions. More importantly, I have found that in our work, when we tell people, and we're going to do this with UK Cabinet, with NASA, with the World Bank, with the BMW Foundation, we've done it with very interesting, complex organizations. When the audience are exposed to the following statement: welcome to this serious event. We have Mr. Minister, we have Madam Head of the UN something or other, and we have these three cartoonists. Everyone wakes up. Everyone says, what the hell is going on? And then we tell them, your job in addition
and then
to
security just throws them out. I mean, the ministers.
Right. And what happens is that when we tell them your job will be to help us communicate more intelligently with the help of these professional humorists who can help you, then everyone thinks of themselves as a creator. It's very difficult to create cartoons. I advise that you don't try on your own because at least I have failed resoundingly, but we have your professional help. And this co-creation is what makes our Cartoonathons most rewarding and most durable, because what emerges ends up having a long life. We find our cartoons when people try to explain to us the things that we did the cartoon for. So
how do you get it? I mean, with the rain, how do you actually make your way into these organizations? Because this is, I guess some people just respond to it because they're dying of boredom. and others are wary because, we've had experiences depending on, there's I guess it's called safetyism. It's more that I may not get rewarded for anything positive. I'll certainly get punished for everything negative. So you have to, how do you do it? I think to some extent it's by your credibility. But what are the difficulties you have? How do you overcome them?
So it has helped to have a trajectory that involved analytically rigorous work. I got a PhD. I did investigate the impacts of long-term climate on the infrastructure of Boston. I worked with Zimbabwean farmers. I ran game sessions in the White House, in the Vatican, with the Parliament of Uganda, and I've worked in 60 countries, like the one you saw in the photo. So no one can accuse me of being someone who doesn't take seriously the work life that we confront. So first, there needs to be some kind of credibility, right?
So you have to get, right, you have to connect in that way. I have a question here that says, Could you talk about the universality of humor? Would the cartoons created by Argentinian cartoonists be similar to New York cartoons? And I mean, I'm actually no, they wouldn't. But what we are looking for, and we are reaching out actually to cartoonists all over the world where it's appropriate. But often the cartoons, especially with these organizations like the World Bank, Red Cross, NASA cartoons going where no cartoons have gone before. Anyway, you're going to, you're dealing essentially with an educated class of people who are responsible for solving problems of intellectual difficulty. And so therefore you're trying to work with them. You're not, the cartoonists aren't, look, first of all, cartoonists never, wherever they're working, they're very flexible. If you're doing cartoons for the New Yorker, that's one thing, whether you were doing cartoons. Now, I mean, in my own case, I was always doing cartoons for myself first, but I knew where they would go. There's still that. And the cartoonists who work on the Cartoonathons, either if it's, I mean, recently I think we had one, or we are having one down in basically in South America, or
Yeah.
so there we're trying obviously to pick cartoonists. It's not all going to be in English. It would be in Spanish, and it would relate to that audience. But there's the universality is that in any of these situations with organizations facing problems, there is the need for humor. There is a need for the humor that gives it perspective.
Right.
Otherwise, organizations can get overwhelmed by their own jargon. They can become blind to how much this is an inside game. They're just talking, to each other. That they're because they're often supposed to be helping people who, frankly, are not in their privileged status. And so you have to make them aware of that. And humor always is a de-dignifier. It always says, okay, let's bring this down a little bit. Are the words you're saying mean anything? Are you really the whole thing about, I mean, a wonderful joke that Kendra did about we put him in the field. Okay, but he's still the same person. He's still a bureaucrat. He's still working at his desk. He's still a paper pusher. That's an answer to that question.
Yeah, and I would also like to add on this question of universality, some cartoons, will not work in a different context. If in your village, no one has experienced a car, let alone a traffic jam, the one that we showed about Trey honking and predictably will not work. Early, I would like to share this cartoon that we used in a recent publication about we caused the problem is coming to bite us. If we stay sitting and do nothing, we're in trouble, right? Well, this cartoon, let me see if I can make it bigger there. Yeah. This cartoon works if you're familiar with the dominoes and you push them and so on, and there may be kids nowadays who haven't seen it. But what I can promise you is that if you have enough cartoons, someone will resonate with at least one of them enough to think that your event was the best event of the entire 5-day conference because they finally got something. One of the things that cartoons have been accomplishing for us is that they work so remarkably like a lightning bolt. They make people totally grab the concept right away, instantly. And it becomes so memorable that they can no longer unsee the truth made evident by the cartoon. Not only the facts or the complexities, but also the emotional reality. We're working a lot outside of my Red Cross work. By the way, I am about 50% of my time across Red Crescent Climate Center, and the other 50% a range of organizations. And we're working a lot on addressing racism. Working to help organizations who realize that if most of your people are white and male and there's a lot of talent that doesn't look like that, You have to create the space to invite them. And one thing you can do to attract that talent that doesn't happen to look white and male is to make them feel comfortable addressing the issue that has been excluding them systematically. When you make people notice through cartoons, they can notice the emotional reality of the other, and they develop empathy, and they develop the desire to engage, to listen, to resolve, and that's so powerful.
There's an interesting comment here about not really about this so much, create a challenge to grade school and high school students to create cartoons like this. Do you think this is a good idea? How could it be done? I do think it's an excellent idea because, frankly, people are so immersed now in memes and, meaningless stuff, which is just consumed in a second. It's a kind of social construct that makes people, but they're not thinking about, how can humor reveal issues that exist in our school, that exist for teenagers in terms of bullying, in terms of discrimination, all of that, and how that could be used in schools and in education, where you.
I would advise that before asking people to create humor, we tried doing that with a cartoon caption competition. We got a good cartoon chosen by Mr. Bob Mankoff, who knew about the topic. We invited my colleagues and myself to create caption. Guess what? The best one kind of sucked, because it's hard to create good humor. It's hard to you need a talent. It's like asking someone to build a computer.
Yeah, you need a talent, and you need to hone it. I got a question here, which is interesting. This is serendipity. Can you show any of the cartoons you're referring to combating racism?
It will be possible if I find
I got
them.
this one right here, Pablo, my own cartoon. It's
All
appeared
right.
in the New Yorker. Oh no, that's not it. That's not it. Yeah.
Well, I can
I
upload one.
I picked the wrong one. Okay, here
I'm going to find one. If people can be patient with me, add media.
Okay, the caption to this cartoon is, "This is the racist bone in your body you said you didn't have."
Right.
So, which appeared in the New Yorker, and I know we've had a number of others that we that you've shown and have been created.
Yeah. So here's one that I'd like to share. This one emerged from a Cartoonathon with a global organization, and let me make myself small again. This is by Fego, Felipe Galindo, who has been one of the consistent contributors. Sometimes doesn't matter what you do, a system that rewards privilege for some will make people do things that feel bad. Fego had another one that I cannot find now that was brilliant. It was about risk and racism. There's a dark-skinned person holding a manual that says risk and racism, trying to share the content with another person who is not just white male, but instead of a head, it's a gigantic mouth. Just the mouth, the lips. And the mouth is saying, I cannot hear what you're saying. And that's exactly what's going on. We have a wealth of them. If anyone is interested, please reach out to me, look me up, Pablo Suarez, humor, cartoons, whatever, Red Cross, and you should be able to drop me an email, and I'll be happy to share more.
So when you, in terms of the Cartoonathons, maybe just explain a little more what actually goes on. What actually goes on at a typical Cartoonathon, a term you came up with, and we'll soon have the trademark of, and what happens. I think it's a little bit hard for people to completely they understand where cartoons can stimulate discussion and dialogue by making people feel safe and by enhancing, their mental flexibility. But how does it actually work?
So let me tell you, I'll answer in 3 steps, starting with the end. The end result of Cartoonathon involves the existence of new cartoons that didn't exist before, that help people notice, that help people talk about difficult things, that help organizations promote events, that help publications become more enjoyable, more compelling, more successful. The end result is successful, intelligent communication to address problems. Before that, you have an event that brings people together. We prefer to have either a 2-hour event or a 60-minute event followed by a 90-minute event, or some combination, but order of magnitude less than half a day total, where we have people who own a problem and are trying to solve it, and artists, and we have designed a series of activities that enables the serious people to understand how humor works and how it can help, and help the humor people to understand what the problem is and how humor can unlock that key to understanding and to action. That is very well designed. We've run by now, I don't know, about 100 Cartoonathons easily, with a very wide range. And these are the ones I know. I know that your team has been offering Cartoonathon services to the private sector and associations of lawyers of California and things like that. And they have all gone well, as I understand.
Yeah.
Now, before that is the part that is kind of difficult for people to understand. You need to create the space for someone who owns a problem to bring people together. So my preference is when there's an existing event that has to accomplish something, and the default plan, you know what, is the usual. 90-minute. Hello and welcome. We're here because there's this problem and our organization cares so much. Then a keynote speaker that says what everyone has heard before, only a bit more authoritatively. Then maybe PowerPoint 1, 2, and 3 for other less senior people that have something to say, that are also, you're in a passive role. Then insufficient Q&A, which is usually a sequence of monologues like it was, and then thank you, goodbye. That is wasteful, that is useless, but it's safe. What we do is we find the allies within organizations, within event planning, within whatever it is, whether it's face-to-face or mostly virtually, because we picked up steam from the pandemic, to create space for virtual, hybrid, or face-to-face events to enable this humor as the bond. By now, we have enough evidence. Very soon, there will be 2 publications that Bob Mankoff and I are co-authors of. Thank you, Bob. You worked so much more than you should have. Thank you, Samantha Winier. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, so many people that made all of this possible.
My wife won't believe.
But basically, the current challenge is for people who smell that there's a there, but don't know how to make it, how to serve it. Come talk to the people who have done Cartoonathons, Bob and Tim, myself, my colleagues at the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center, and you will learn and you will see if it's the solution for you. I predict it's likely to be.
Pablo, you're always involved in a lot of interesting other things. You're always basically anything. Pablo and I are involved with AI and humor, and Pablo is involved with all sorts of organizations that look to inject humor or just creativity into various serious events. So maybe you could talk a little bit about some of them. I think you mentioned something about NASA.
Yeah, so we had a workshop. I work with NASA with a team that specializes in the use of satellite imagery to understand flood risks. And we had a 4-day training where my colleague Andrew Kruksevich and I went to one of the NASA centers, and we trained them over 4 days on how to use their awesome information for decisions, and how to infuse their tools into financial instruments for humanitarian work, for flood preparedness, and so on. So we already had a presence there from a technical and organizational point of view. That was the early stages of our collaboration with you, Bob, on humor. And I mentioned a range of things they could do, including humor and cartoons. It came as one of the 2 things that NASA said, we want to do more of that. Then we facilitated a session with one of the groups, and I won't go into detail, there's no time. And now there's another team that is thinking, okay, we want to create learning as core of what motivates human to go out of Earth. And so I'm fortunate to be having conversations with colleagues that are opening the doors to change how we think about the rest of the world, about each other, and about our world from the perspective of being on the moon. And Bob, I hope that we make the first cartoon compilation of We're on the Moon.
Absolutely. I think I'm aiming first for a cartoon in low Earth orbit. It doesn't actually have to be, or maybe sub-orbit, like the Bezos thing. Just to take a cartoon, then we go to higher orbit, and then finally go where cartoons have never gone before. I think as I spoke to, Carl Sagan, they sent out that record with all, songs and various artifacts, sound of the human existence, but no jokes. And my theory is why we've never been contacted is because the other civilizations don't think we have a sense of humor. So if we get those cartoons out there, I think that might happen. Look, Pablo, it's been great talking to you. I want to give some information. If you want to get in touch with Pablo, it's suarez@bu.edu. If you're interested in Cartoonathons in any way, I think it's Cartoonathon/cartoonstock.com. That might be wrong. Jessica will text me, is that wrong or is that right, Jessica? But actually, if you put up Cartoonathons in Google, you're going to get there because we are Cartoonathons. Absolutely. Okay, here it is. Cartoonstock.com/Cartoonathons. Very good. Anyway, we're going to sign off now. Please, I hope you guys are interested in this, gals as well. And, have a great weekend and try to look at some cartoons and laugh a little bit, but also worry about the coming apocalypse. Try to balance it. Okay,
Thank you.
That's going to be it for me.
Thank you so much.